We need to secure our border and fix the immigration system. You can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. You think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests? I want you to know, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay.
President Joe Biden has had a rough first year, and his State of the Union was just as rough. First and foremost, the speech brought about the magical end to the COVID-19 pandemic. Congress lifted its mask requirement just in time for the speech, and social distancing was the thing of the past, as cabinet officials and Biden himself exchanged hugs, kisses, and handshakes. And the first words out of the president's mouth described how the COVID crisis had magically ended. The sudden change in science was undoubtedly a signal to the American people that everything is fine, despite countless crises of the administration's own making. The first crisis Biden mentioned was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The commander-in-chief burned as much time as possible diverting from his failures here at home by talking about the courage of the Ukrainian people, or the Iranian people, as he fumbled at one point.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
In any case, the Ukraine diatribe gave his State of the Union a wartime flavor as members of Congress waved Ukrainian flags and wore coordinating Ukrainian-themed outfits. Biden had some strong words for Vladimir Putin and Russia's oligarchs, vowing to stand alongside Western Europe while countering Russian aggression. For the first time, he unveiled a ban on Russian aircraft in American airspace.
I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia.
Biden even had the gall to declare boldly that freedom will always triumph over tyranny, ignoring his own tyrannical measures that have upended millions of lives here in the United States. Once the State of the European Union address was over, Biden finally moved on to regularly scheduled programming. He instantly took an apologetic tone, softening the blow of high gas prices by couching it in the Ukraine conflict, then whispering in his soft old man voice that we're going to be okay. Biden tried his very best to celebrate economic wins, immediately pulling out the Scranton Joe routine and insisting that he knows what Americans are going through.
I get it.
He slammed President Trump's $2 trillion tax cut and instead argued that his $2 trillion American Rescue Plan led to more jobs in a single year than in the history of the United States, ignoring the fact that those were all jobs that were being regained from the recession, not created from scratch. But that line nevertheless provoked a very early and very awkward applause from Chuck Schumer. Biden then pivoted to the bipartisan infrastructure law, his only other legislative victory in his first year of office. Skipping over the fact that only a fraction of that bill finances roads and bridges, he framed it as a way to compete with China, the rising superpower that pours more concrete every 3 years than America did in the entire 20th century. Biden also borrowed from Donald Trump's playbook, hitting the Made in America chord over and over, featuring new manufacturing facilities by Intel and Ford. But what about the economic reality on every American's mind? Inflation. Rather than saying, "I'm sorry" or "my bad," Biden's message was, "I get it." Rather than explaining how he would deal with federal spending, Biden put the blame on American businesses, exhorting them to lower your costs, not your wages.
Lower your costs, not your wages.
Biden then quickly moved on from rising price levels to talk about any other economic issue he could muster up. Prescription drugs, healthcare, energy, childcare. His solution was the same for all of them. More federal programs, and therefore, more federal spending. But no mention of the inflation that would surely follow, or how he would mitigate it. And when explaining how he would pay for all of those new programs, Biden said that he would raise taxes on those evil corporations and rich people, promising that the average American wouldn't have to pay more taxes, but that he would merely make the rich pay their fair share.
I'm not looking to punish anybody, but let's make corporations and wealthy Americans start paying their fair share.
It's a classic progressive maneuver, rebranding legalized theft as economic justice. And moments after confidently saying, "I'm a capitalist," he announced that he would start cracking down on companies trying to deal with the high inflation environment. I don't know if that's cruel irony or if he just truly doesn't understand what capitalism is.
There's a whole lot of confusion.
So what did Biden leave out of his wide-ranging economic oration? The fact that his administration put millions of people in a terrible situation: get vaccinated and boosted or lose your job. And while many did choose to get the shots, thousands were also kicked to the curb. Only now are those vaccine mandates being removed, after the Supreme Court struck them down thanks to the Daily Wire's lawsuit and the leadership of the Do Not Comply movement. Pivoting hard from his vaccine-centered agenda, the president once again unpacked the new science. Good news! The almighty CDC has ruled from on high that Americans can now go maskless. As Ted Cruz noticed, it's a State of the Union miracle. Biden did mention vaccines, saying, "You can't build a wall to keep out a vaccine." Whatever that means.
Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine.
But Biden didn't dwell on vaccinations, probably trying to make Americans forget about his party's browbeating over the mandates. Instead, he borrowed from Ron DeSantis' playbook.
You not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater.
And featured the myriad of ways that Americans can deal with COVID: antiviral treatments, free and widely available tests, and much more. He did the same thing with bringing government schools back in person, declaring that our kids need to be in school, and failing to mention that he and his allies are the ones responsible for keeping them at home. Instead, he diverted once again by coming down hard on bullying and the effects of social media on children, even trotting out Frances Haugen, the progressive activist turned Facebook whistleblower. To top it all off, Biden said that the virus itself was the agent causing division in American society. But Biden was the one who, very recently, branded the crisis as a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
We're still in a pandemic of the unvaccinated. This continues to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. I know I've said that constantly.
Continuing his damage control for the Democrats, Biden wholeheartedly rejected the defund the police narrative and shouted that his agenda would fund the police.
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
Democrat lawmakers applauded right alongside the Republicans, as if the past 2 years of politicized racial unrest and leftist revolution never even happened. At this point, Biden thanked Justice Stephen Breyer for his service and introduced his new Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, calling her the consensus builder, despite her radical pro-abortion background. And on immigration, Biden didn't mention that the southern border is currently seeing a record surge, and then he turned a blind eye to his own administration quietly flying migrants into America's cities in the dead of night. Instead, he emphasized his willingness to increase surveillance. To the casual listener, there was a moment where he sounded indistinguishable from Donald Trump and other border hawks.
If we're to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system.
When Biden finally got around to Afghanistan, he didn't mention the disastrous end to the two-decade, $2 trillion war that happened on his watch. And it took a Republican shouting from the audience to bring up the 13 service members who died last August in Biden's botched withdrawal.
We'll put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know.
13! But what did he come down hard against? Burn pits, provoking applause from Nancy Pelosi for some unbeknownst reason.
Breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there.
Biden's pretty much failed at everything he's touched. So what is he planning to do now? Cure cancer, of course.
Let's end cancer as we know it.
Biden called on Congress to pass legislation bankrolling cancer research, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. There's much more to talk about. How Biden managed to brand abortion as maternal health care, how Biden painted the picture of deer in Kevlar vests when pushing gun control.
You think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests?
And concluding his speech with the call to go get him, without really defining who he is. Maybe Corn Pop? He's a pretty bad dude. So what's the takeaway? It's that the State of the Union is bad, but the state of the Democratic Party is much, much worse.
Go get him!